I am Gaius Julius Caesar. History will remember my name, my deeds, and my ambition. But what few understand is the journey, the trials, and the cost of greatness. Let me take you through my life as I saw it, from my early beginnings to the fateful Ides of March. This is my story, my rise, my triumphs, and my fall. I was born in 100 BC into the ancient patrician family, the Julii clan. Though noble, my family had lost much of its political influence in Rome. But I knew, even as a boy, that I was destined for something greater than what my family name could offer. I was driven by a burning desire for power, for glory, for the kind of legacy that would live on for millennia. At 16, my father died. It was a turning point in my life. I was suddenly the head of my household, responsible for my family's future. To secure my position, I married Cornelia, the daughter of an influential leader of the Populares faction. That choice nearly cost me my life. Sulla the dictator saw my marriage as a threat. He demanded I divorce Cornelia, but I refused. That decision, my defiance, set me on the path that would define my life. I was forced into exile, hiding in the countryside, with my life in danger. But I survived, as I always did. When Sulla died, I returned to Rome. It was then that I realized to change Rome, I would have to embrace political power by securing military might, without hesitation. So, I sought out the provinces, the places where I could prove myself on the battlefield. It was in Hispania that I first tasted true command, leading Roman legions into battle, defeating the local tribes, and winning the respect of my men. But Hispania was just the beginning. When I came back to Rome, the Senate despised me. I could feel their glares whenever I entered the forum, jealous and suspicious. But I was no fool. I formed the first triumvirate with Pompey and Crassus. I knew Pompey had the military experience and the respect. Crassus had the money, and I was strategic. It was this political alliance that made me consul and then governor of Gaul. Gaul, that vast, untamed land, became my true stage for greatness. For 8 long years, I led the Roman legions through Gaul, conquering tribe after tribe. I crossed the Rhine into Germania, becoming the first Roman general to do so. I even crossed the sea to Britannia, a land unknown to Rome. With every victory, my name grew louder. The people loved me for my bravery and charm as I sent back the booties of war to them. They saw me as their champion, a man who understood the common struggles of Rome's citizens, and soon I had the wealth and the loyalty of my men, 2 things you need to rule. But the Senate grew fearful of my power, of my ambition. The first triumvirate started to fall apart when Crassus died in war. My daughter Julia had married Pompey, but when she died in childbirth, the last bond was cut. My former ally turned against me. Pompey became the Senate's pawn. They ordered me to disband my army, give up my title, and return to Rome. To declare my men and I as criminals of the state? But I was not going to go in peace and become exiled like they made my uncle Gaius Marius do. I was not a man to follow orders, especially when they came from those who feared me. It was January 49 BC, at the banks of the Rubicon River, that I made the decision that would change everything. I knew that if I crossed the river with my army, it would be an act of war, a declaration of rebellion against the Roman Senate. But I also knew that turning back was not an option. As I stood on the banks, I spoke the words that history would remember. Alea iacta est, the die is cast. I led my legions across the Rubicon, marching towards Rome, knowing there would be no return. When we returned, the city was empty. Citizens hid in their homes they boarded up, expecting the worst. Pompey and some of the Senate fled. They assumed they had until spring to gather forces. It was as if the gods had given me the city with open arms, but I knew I still had to fight to keep it. The civil war that followed was brutal, a clash between two titans, myself and Pompey. At first it was a cat-and-mouse game, me chasing Pompey just short of catching him, but I was relentless. In the Battle of Pharsalus, I defeated him, scattering his armies and forcing him to flee to Egypt. But Egypt would not be his sanctuary. He was assassinated upon his arrival, and his severed head was presented to me as a gift. I did not rejoice at the sight of my former friend and ally's demise, but I accepted the reality of the world we lived in. Power was everything, and mercy was a luxury I could not afford. It was in Egypt that I met Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. She was young, intelligent, and ambitious, much like myself. Our alliance was both political and personal. Together we secured her throne and formed a bond that would last for years. Cleopatra gave me a son, Caesarion, but our time together was short. My mind was still on Rome, on securing my position as its undisputed leader. By 45 BC, I had returned to Rome, victorious. I was declared dictator for life. I had achieved everything I had set out to do. I was the most powerful man in the world, and yet I knew that power was fragile. I sought to reform Rome, to reshape it in my image. I passed laws to help the poor, to distribute land, to bring order to the chaotic Senate. I even reformed the calendar, creating the Julian calendar, which would be used for centuries. Most importantly, I offered clemency to fellow Romans who fought against me, including Brutus. We had always been good friends, and I loved his mother, Servilia. His family also founded the Republic. How would that look if I ordered his death? I knew I had to keep him alive. He was no threat to me. Despite my reforms, I could feel the undercurrent of resistance. There were those who saw me not as a leader, but as a tyrant. They whispered in dark corners, plotting against me. I knew that my enemies were closing in, but I was Caesar. I believed I was untouchable. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, I walked into the Senate, surrounded by those I believed to be my allies. But as I entered, the air was thick with treachery, and it was oddly quiet. I didn't see the first dagger, but I felt it. Then came another, and another. I'm trying to stay on my feet, realizing I'm slipping on my own blood, grabbing at anyone to help, but no one intervened. No one even tried. My body, once the strongest in Rome, was now riddled with wounds. I fell, there in the Senate, the place where I had once commanded so much power, looking at all the faces who stabbed me. And then I saw him, Brutus, my friend, my protégé, the one I had trusted most of all. His dagger struck deep, not just into my flesh, but into my heart. Et tu, Brute, even you, Brutus? The conspirators had their victory, but they did not understand what they had done. They had killed the man, but they could never kill the legacy. As I look back on my life, I see the path I carved through history. I was not without flaws. My ambition was boundless, and it drove me to make enemies as easily as I made allies. But in the end, it was that very ambition that allowed me to achieve greatness. I conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, defeated Pompey, and became Rome's ruler. My reforms, my victories, my name, none of these will ever be forgotten. My death was not the end, but the beginning, for Rome would not return to the days of the Republic. No, my heir, my great-nephew Octavian, would rise, and with him, the Roman Empire would be born. The empire that would stand for centuries, built on the foundation that I laid, with my blood, my sweat, and in the end, my life. I am Gaius Julius Caesar. Remember my name, not as a tyrant, but as a man who reshaped an empire, who reached for the stars and nearly touched them.